Hello, in this video we're going to go through part 2 of photosynthesis. So in a previous video I went over kind of the general overview of photosynthesis, and this was the last picture that we saw where, remember, photosynthesis comes in two parts, the light reactions and then the Calvin cycle. And so now we're going to go over exactly what's happening in both the light reactions and the Calvin cycle. So the first part is, again, the light reactions where we're going to be absorbing light to produce ATP and NADPH. But first, let's talk about how that light is getting absorbed. So light is going to be absorbed as a photon. So light travels in photons. And in this structure called the photosystem, this light is going to be absorbed and is going to be used to energize electrons. Now this structure called a photosystem is a protein that is found on the thylakoid membrane. So remember, the thylakoid are those pancakes found inside of chloroplasts. And so the photosystem has these structures that absorb photons and convert that photon into energy, and that energy is basically transferred to two electrons, so a pair of electrons, and those electrons are going to be energized. So basically an electron that's energized is an electron that goes from its ground state to its quote unquote excited state. So that is what's happening to the electrons. And by the way, this is happening through this very special type of pigment called chlorophyll. And so chlorophyll is really important in this whole process of energizing electrons and absorbing light energy. Okay, so these electrons are now energized, and guess what? They're going to go through this process, which is very similar to the electron transport chain in cell respiration. We call it the electron transport chain for photosynthesis. So these energized electrons go through the electron transport chain, and we're going to see how this all happens. So first of all, where do these electrons come from? They come from water. So water gets converted to oxygen, and basically we're splitting water. And when water gets split, two low energy electrons are going to go into photosystem number 2. Okay, now why are we starting with photosystem number 2 and not photosystem number 1? Well, that's just how they're named. So photosystem number 1 was discovered first, photosystem number 2 was discovered later, but in the actual electron transport chain, photosystem number 2 is first. That's just how it is. But anyway, so two low energy electrons from water are going to go into photosystem number 2, and they're going to be energized through light, as we saw in the previous diagram. Now, again, in this process, oxygen is going to be made, and two hydrogen ions are going to be released as well. Okay, so these electrons are going to be passed along through plastoquinone. So plastoquinone is a carrier molecule. It's going to carry it to this cytochrome complex. And as they're traveling to the cytochrome complex, hydrogens are going to be moved into the thylakoid space. So basically what's happening is we are accumulating hydrogens in this thylakoid space. So as you can see, it's got high H+ concentration. And that will be, important for later. So continuing on with this diagram, the electrons, which are now low energy, are going to be moved into photosystem number 2 through this plastocyanin molecule. Now, what's happening with all the hydrogens? So I kind of skipped this bullet point, but these hydrogens are going to be moved through ATP synthase. And guess what? ATP is going to be made. So this whole process right here is very similar to cell respiration, where hydrogens are going to be pumped. Sorry, not pumped. They're going to travel through ATP synthase using facilitated diffusion, and that's going to be powering the production of ATP. And then again, the low energy electrons that are here in cytochrome complex are going to be traveling to photosystem number 1. And in photosystem number 1, they're going to be energized a second time. Now, these high energy electrons are going to be transferred to a NADP plus reductase, which is this protein right here, who moves them, this ferredoxin molecule. So ferredoxin moves these high energy electrons to NADP plus reductase. That's a very long name. And guess what? This whole thing is going to be producing NADPH, because remember, NADPH carries 2 high energy electrons. So essentially what happens is the first part of the photosynthesis electron transport chain is pumping hydrogen so that we can make ATP. And then the second half of this whole process is energizing electrons, which are going to be picked up by NADPH. And so that's how we make those 2 high energy molecules. ATP is being made and NADPH is being made. And as you can see in the last part of this diagram, both the ATP and NADPH are going to travel to the Calvin cycle to produce sugar. Now, again, if the cell needs to use this energy immediately, it's going to use the ATP immediately, and that's pretty much it. But if the cell wants to store this energy long term, that's when it goes into the Calvin cycle to produce sugar. So here's a very simplistic diagram of what happens in the Calvin cycle. Again, we are making sugar. So the main thing that's happening is carbon dioxide is being absorbed. So plants absorb carbon dioxide and they're going to what we call fixate it. So carbon is going to be integrated into a larger molecule through this enzyme called rubisco. And again, there's a lot of steps that are happening, but we're not really going to go into detail. But basically ATP and NADPH are going to be used throughout the entire cycle. And we're going to be making a 3-carbon sugar. Now, this 3-carbon sugar is usually G3P, and hopefully you recognize G3P because that is one of the molecules that is produced during glycolysis. So this G3P, a bunch of it is made, and it's going to be used to basically do reverse glycolysis to produce sugar, glucose. And so that's what's happening in the Calvin cycle. So this 3-carbon sugar is going to be used to make glucose, but other sugars can be made as well. And again, it is a cycle. So the reason why it's a cycle is because we have to go back here and produce a molecule that would be used to integrate the carbons. And we're basically just going in a circle here. So that is pretty much what's happening. Again, there's a lot of steps that are being skipped because I'm really just highlighting the main events that are happening. Carbon dioxide is being absorbed, ATP and NADPH are being used to make this 3-carbon sugar, and then the cycle basically continues. So that's the Calvin cycle in a really short nutshell. And that is pretty much all of photosynthesis. So really not too much. If you know cell respiration, then photosynthesis is really not too difficult to understand because the concepts are almost the same. It's just kind of going backwards. So yeah, hopefully this video was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.